Supposedly the cool silver birch bowl, barely 2 hips width, shudders like a woman on the brink of believing in her man. They are 2 rivers running into each other. Claret is fusing fast, where Cold Harbour Lane runs out into Camberwell Green, the confluence of the Elbe and the Upper. So, as bane flower proliferate, cinquefoil and cress, or silt build scum upon scum, still they run on sieve-panned, and, as prospectors bent for what wild seam of beryl, jasper or jade jet-streamed, might yet convert bedrock into discarded jewellery. 2 rivers, one back, spine-glint as a string of bulbs, 2 Pilsner Urquells kinked, their quartz-strewn gravel beds groan as the waters withdraw. I fly later slip the Ritzian Relton Road to smoke the cool lips of Bathsheba, moonlit awry, rear-line tank top, overlap of leaf against leaf, veined light, long-legged fly floats arced, stilt stanced on garlic bulbs stippling estuarial banks. Found a copy of Roy Fisher's The Dowlow Drop in the gutter outside of Bookmongers, leaf mulch, sailboat headed elsewhere, or as the confluence of the Elbe and the Upper. Them sank in couch grass, dew nips swollen, bare-assed blocked, tributary where shyness meets shyness and forms a pane of glass. Breath, swipe, swipe. His sly cigarette, her furtive stretch for a book, nipple-smudged night smock, Milan Kundera's slowness, modernism gone, with it the confluence of the Elbe and the Upper. This book is called Rake, and when you put a book out, not an erudite audience like yourselves, but other people in the pub say, what's it about? And then you tell them what it's about, and then they start talking about the about, and they forget about the poems. But you have to put an about out, so you've got 3 choices of what this book is about. A, it's about an immortal time-travelling rake who is searching for his one true beloved through a heroic succession of amorous encounters, desperate to get beyond appetite. And the time-travelling is involuntary, it's like a neural twitch. Or B, it's about a whole pack, which is the proper collective noun for a pack of rakes who are doing the same thing. Or C, it's about an ordinary guy who, having drunk 3 treble espressos in quick succession, believes himself to be time-travelling. So now you've got that fixed, everything else will be plain sailing. We go back to Brixton, this is called Foregone Conclusion. Half inching, then dropping down, the turquoise pale, dolphin-studded drain pipes of the Hotel Pimondin, escaping Baudelaire's crazy demi-mondaine, who is pelting me with gemstones. I unaccountably land at the back of Beehive Place, Brixton, 1987, 2 dealers stepping forth from their wall niche to intone, how's about something beautiful to help you stay the same? I trade a gemstone and the deal is done. Later will find me prone on a South London curbstone, some lachrymose nose-ringed fly girl battering at my breastbone with little fists, ahead of the foregone conclusion, my rare heart bursting like the sun, mind half inching up the turquoise pale dolphin-studded drain pipes of the Hotel Pimondin, tapping at the cracked window, hoping to get back in. There was a critic, an American critic called Guy Davenport, and he talked about the idea of originality was a very 20th century phenomenon, generally in art and poetry, very loosely before that. It wasn't such a great thing. And 99.9% of this next poem are not my words, if we ever own words at all. They're taken from the inestimable epistolary novel, La Liaison Dangereuse by Chodlerus de la Cloche. Don't ask me to say that sentence again, particularly after I've had some of your beautiful cider. I wouldn't be able to say it. So I think I changed one word possibly to get a word order. It kind of comes out as a sonnet. It's called Written Immediately on Waking. But first let me tell you about my gaucherie between laurel and myrtle in the great enterprise where tyranny is adored and the unconsolable spouse is keeping her word on the arms of this great spindle shanks, surveying her injuries, imagining a pride, or at least being able to recognise a profligate soul of the side roads, this footman who changes into chambermaid chic, or reads Crebillon Feces' licentious novel La Sofa. How perfectly suited to being a lover. We had 6 hours together, folded but unsealed in a trough of sleep or panegyric. Oh, mademoiselle, knowledge of your weakness is my leisure. Poets don't earn much money, so thank you for paying to come and see us. It's fantastic. Ledbury pays. We've seen all the scandals in the paper. Ledbury pays well, so that's good. But we always have to have sidelines to be able to keep going. So I've tried various things. My last attempt was to launch a perfume. I thought, well, Beyonce has done it, and David Beckham has done it very successfully. I thought I'd launch a poetry-themed perfume. I was a little discouraged with the sales. It was called The Smell of Charles Bukowski. It didn't seem to go so well. But I've got new hope. I've got a new idea. I've designed an app. That's the thing to do to make money. There's an app for everything now, so I've designed an app. Very specific what this app does. What it does is it gives you a genuine paper cut when you're reading a novel on Kindle. And, strangely enough, there's a paper cut and La Liaison Dangereux in this next poem. It's called Misery Memoir. I've just finished La Liaison Dangereux by La Cloche, the book's edge pink as litmus. A paper cut to be run through by a flyleaf, this seep of blood, this plotting with a life never fully known. And laid out on this heavy hung-for poster with Madame de and Madame de, mounting the very roster of their names. Their restless petticoats chime with a riotous blossom outside. Exhaustion is a form of exhilaration. Witness the last of any decaying nation. His full name was Pierre Ambrose Francois Chaudelus de la Cloche. Even reading it aloud could lead one to exhaustion or a total lack of will to ever finish a novel or anything built to last. Excuse me while I ply my slit finger with elastoplast. The book doesn't have sections. I don't really like sections in books. It's great for other people. I don't really do it, but it's kind of, in some ways, the first half is kind of mirrored by some of the poems in the second half. And that poem, Foregone Conclusion, the second one I read, is in a sonnet string, which kind of veers between Paris 1848 and Brixton in the 1980s, and back and forth. And there's another sonnet string in the second half of the book, which are more kind of possibly lyrical or pastoral in old terms, and they're all named after trees. But it's not so much about trees as possibly they seem. This one is called Willow. If you've ever felt the fallout from an arc of welding sparks or bent to a burst of fireworks, then you may be able to show a touch more sympathy as to what it must be like to lie in its filtery lee by the boating lake of this shabby municipal park, doing nothing, almost blissfully. But I know you haven't, and therefore won't, and lack the gift of telepathic empathy. You disappoint me. They have bent towards water through history since the days of the Ark, their leaves typically sad but soothing sparks. This one bends to a dank culvert and a concrete bulwark. A flask of filter coffee, the collected works of Percy, Bysshe, Shelley, who knew this one as a sapling, knew me. You might even see the mistletoe at its height if your lenses were in and it wasn't so dark. In the second half of the book, this rake figure, if he is a rake figure, or if he's a he or a she, or whatever it is, seems like he's slightly more, in the first half he's pretty dissolute, in the second half he's pretty dissolute, but it seems like in the second half he begins to maybe get glimmers after 2,000 years ping-ponging around time and the world and numerous affairs, that other people exist and that they're quite beautiful and they have charm and they can appreciate them. This is just beginning to break through onto his consciousness. In real life, this poem was started up by a friend of mine, gave me a CD, and she said, "You must listen to this, Matthew. Every track on it is brilliant." I thought, come on. And I put it on. Every track was brilliant. And it had various things on, lots of blues, Howling Wolf, which I loved, and Sun House, which I loved. And it had Gavin Bryar's fantastic Jesus' Blood Never Saved Me, which is a fantastic piece. And it had William Burroughs, you know, the great beat author, singing a Marlene Dietrich type voice, singing Falling in Love Again, which is a pretty amazing thing to hear if you ever want to hear it. But on it was a track, I thought I knew a bit about blues music, it was a track by a blues singer I'd never heard before, and she's mentioned at the end of this poem. And I was raised as a Catholic, but I'm a born-again atheist, but I almost converted here in this track. It's absolutely beautiful. So that was the kind of real-life inspiration for this poem. It's called Absolute Gospel. As she breathes honey into rock, or the fragrance of magnolia petals onto a southern wind, what gets blown back are the husky salient details that would make any atheist talk as if all four gospels were burnt onto their tongue, hoard a wondrous lack as the track ends and the train pulls out of that slow licentious summer, has them instantly comprehend why this gilt, skinny white boy stands, armed only with a tack hammer, ready to take on thousands for a single note from blind Mamie Forehand. I guess if you're called blind Mamie Forehand, you have to go down in history somehow. She recorded somewhere in about 1924, very early on. She was worked in plantations with her husband, and they performed together in the evenings. They wrote only 4 songs. He wrote 2, she wrote 2. There's one called Honey on the Rock. It's very difficult to get hold of it, but if you can, listen to it. It's shiveringly brilliant. Ezra Pound said that about poets that the thing itself is always the adequate symbol, and my kind of version on that is that I like the thing itself to be an inadequate symbol, that it doesn't quite gel. So you pick something that's you're probably not going to work with and try and go with it. This poem is called Walnuts. Then the heat wave flinched and the trees arched upwards as if replenished, when your brown eyes tried so haltingly to withhold a tear, and their surfaces pearled darkly for about 1 microsecond, then dried. You told me about your grandfather, walnut groves, graves, my duty to cave into need, to cave into beauty at any opportunity, but you flirted with the waiter, and the 5 tines of your fork lit up the rude. Then that tear retreated. Your half-wipe could not have been lighter, though inside you were irrigated as if after a long drought by a dew so wet it would straighten out the wrinkles on a walnut to a tabletop. I would have you in a white vest, ravish you on that table covered in walnuts. Excuse me, I would be dishonest with you, but for this shimmering night and all propriety outlawed. There, that's said. Okay, this is the last one. I'm going to read something that I always finish with. I think it's something that we all need, a Cold War communist love poem. And this poem is called The Young Hegelians. And it's not an academic thing at all. I was once in Nottingham with my sister when I was about 15 in a Cardoma coffee bar, and there were all these students from the university in black polo necks and smoking chitans and things, talking philosophy. And I heard the phrase, the young Hegelians. I just thought it was the most beautiful, I don't know who they were or what they represent, the most beautiful phrase I'd ever heard. I wanted a t-shirt with the young Hegelians. I wanted to form a band, Matthew Caley and the young Hegelians. I wanted to go to sea with the young Hegelians. It's so beautiful. So I've been trying to get the young Hegelians into a poem for about 30 years, and hopefully I finally managed it. And this is a twin, really, with the very first poem that I ballsed up in the first half, called The Confluence of the Elbe and the Upper. And they both share kind of rivers that don't meander where they actually meander. This is the final one, the young Hegelians. Supposedly the river Never disperses the waters of Lake Ladoga through the Gulf of Finland into the Baltic Sea, and might be the site for a purge of leaders, looters in food halls, an awning frozen to a portcullis of icicles. We sat shiver still, discussing dialectic like any group of Prussian intellectuals, Hegel, a Hegel reader. We were either side of that chill sea, Gin soda, grey interference, yet your eyes, black floor in green, green floor in black, made me thaw. Wind that could rend a windsock made your own voice seem as if coming through a vocoder, though you stood next to me, trying to sell some bootleg CDs to no one, Ect Phil Oakey, gone solo, produced by Giorgio Moroder, your eyes like sloes against snow. We knew history has no coda, but sings in our ears on shuffle, incessantly on shuffle, like wind through a cracked wind bell. Knew the still never would disperse Ladoga's drift into the Gulf of Mexico, turn fumarole, make green vegetation steam. Later, warmed by the radio in your Skoda, you would show me the petrified shopping malls and beautiful on the open road police horse droppings frozen into snowballs.